Oh, okay. I make a motion that we appoint Ed as chair for this evening's meeting.
Oh, I got second.
All those in favor? We'll call the meeting to order, planning board meeting for April 23rd, 2026 at 6:03 PM. And we have to review minutes for December 11th, 2025.
I have reviewed them, and I accept them as read.
All those in favor? Okay, that's good. Next, it looks like it's on you, Shane. The CEO of the, your report.
All right, thank you all for coming. So tonight we're going to address two ordinance changes. The first one being the industrial zoning over in Oxford. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a rundown of what the changes entail, and then we'll open it up to questions from the board and from you folks. So, as I said, the first one is a proposed zoning change around the area of East Oxford Road, Station, Whittemore, and Schoolhouse Road. So a backstory is, we had a resident that was talking about building a home, a private residence on his property, and we get to look at the zoning map, found out that that area is zoned industrial. So based on our zoning ordinances, anybody living in that industrial zone, there's 20 properties directly affected by that, the current industrial zoning. 17 of which are private residents, 3 of them are businesses. So based on the way it's currently zoned, the town cannot issue a building permit for so much as a garage in the industrial zone, or anything to do with residential. So this is the time of year we take a look at our ordinances and decide what it is we need to change. And we narrowed it down to 2. The second one will be the solar ordinance we'll address. So this was definitely priority. Backstory, you're all probably wondering why it's industrial to begin with. So back in 1989-ish, there was a proposal made by some developers to build a warehouse along the railroad tracks. I believe it was going to be New England Public Warehouse. For whatever reason, after the town voted to change the zoning to accommodate the new construction never happened. So since then, it's been left industrial. And the question, the $1 million question is, why wasn't it changed back? And I can't answer that. I don't know why it wasn't changed back, but we felt it was appropriate to change it back to eliminate any issues and to keep the town from violating its own zoning ordinance. So if you look at your maps I handed out, one is labeled proposed, the one that's not labeled is the current zoning map. I did not indicate where the change is made. So what I'll do is I'll come up front and show everybody. I don't know. So here's the current zoning map. So the area in question is this little butterfly, whatever you want to call it, looking purple blotch right here. So that area encompasses 20 separate properties, 17 of which are residential and 3 are commercial. Just that small little piece. Where my finger's at. Right here. So that's currently all zoned industrial right here. That's all purple. If you look at the proposed map, the colors have changed. And basically, the only portion that was left industrial on this map is record lumber. Okay? We didn't see the need to change it. It didn't affect them, so we left that as industrial. On the west side, we give them a variance here, the west side of East Oxford Road, a lot of that was changed to, was mixed use, which is residential and commercial. And on the right side of East Oxford Road, the right side of East Oxford Road, heading towards East Oxford, that was changed back to rural. The other handout you have is the land use table. Basically, the first page that's yellow, it has the yellow highlights. That shows land uses in the residential zone. If you look at the industrial column and you come across, everything that's inside the residential allowed uses is prohibited in the industrial zone. And if you turn back towards highlighted in green, it also shows industrial compared to mixed use residential and rural areas. If that makes sense to you folks. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask the board. Yes, sir.
So if it was left under industrial, the person could still put a residence if they applied for a variance, possibly?
No,
No variance,
no,
period.
no, it clearly states, I suppose you could file an appeal,
Right.
but, as far as, to my knowledge, where it's strictly prohibited, there's no pathway to an appeal process.
The other question is, going to a mixed use, it can be other businesses besides residential.
Yes.
Are we gonna be putting in more cannabis shops?
Well,
Just a question. Well, you can shake your head all you want, but I'm just asking the question.
Well, if you were at the last few selectmen's meeting, they're working on that.
Okay, so that means
I
they're
can't
working on
speak
it, but what does it,
I
what does it
can't
mean?
speak to the select board, but there is concern that there is too many
Right,
and maybe limiting the amount that there currently is.
and that's the only thing that's making us look at this change is just going from industrial to mixed use. Not for any reason, nobody's come before the board and wants
No.
something.
No, nobody's come before the board
Okay.
to,
Yeah.
nothing's come across my desk as far as a proposal,
Yeah.
a site plan for, another cannabis establishment in East Oxford.
We've got a slot to
And if it did, it would have to go before the planning board,
Right.
and it would play out just like this.
Unfortunately, the selectmen never put a cap on how many could be here when they voted.
But if it's left as industrial, it'd be capped,
Right.
period,
Yes.
for that area.
I have a question.
You can go first.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, why did we go with, just curious why we went with, where everything else around there is rural, why did we go with mixed use versus going rural like everything else?
I think it was just to provide more opportunity. That was my takeaway from speaking with Erica from AvCog. So I've been working closely with AvCog, and, this is just a starting point. So if we approve this tonight, it'll go as is. If we want to change it to all rural, we can do that, and then we would come back to the planning board again. So this is a starting point, but it was a starting point that we felt was a fair compromise, because there are 3 businesses located in that area currently. So you have Record Lumber, you have
Well, they're in the
Landscaping,
industrial, so-
and you have AmeriGas.
Oh, what about America? Yeah, right there by the tracks, been there forever.
Yeah.
So being.
So by
rural,
leaving
they
it mixed
can't-
use, it kind of keeps them in compliance as well, and doesn't exclude them.
Makes sense, okay, I got you.
So we're at 104 Station Road, and 4 or 5 years ago, our barn burned. And if I wanted to put up a new barn now, the way that it's zoned, I wouldn't be able to, right?
Actually, no, you could, because that little sliver of property where your
Oh,
house and
right,
barn
right. I
is
forgot about that.
was, for whatever reason, was the only tiny little
left.
sliver that didn't get rezoned.
I'm pretty sure that it was highly negotiated.
Which kind of brings us here tonight, because I came to Shane in thinking in the future of maybe subdividing our house, which is on a 17-acre parcel. It's odd that we can't identify what part of our parcel actually is residential and is not industrial. Though, my thought process was, either the whole thing needs to be industrial or the whole thing should be residential, because it's one lot. But I will say this, I think along the line here, unofficially, the zoning has changed, because we were approved for residence on our parcel at one point with another code enforcement officer. It's been previous, and I think prior to Shane, the one before, went through and cleaned up some of this, and somehow it's back where it should be industrial, but I think along the line here, it has gone back and forth, unofficially, if you will. I don't know. So, I think some of this tonight is because it's just not clean the way it is.
No, it's not. And without throwing anybody under the bus or going down rabbit holes, mistakes have been made by past code enforcement. I'm sure I've been in this position since October. I'm sure I'll have my fair share of estate trophies to hang on the shelf. So it's not a concern as far as the town, those mistakes. We just live with them. The issue in my experience in dealing with shoreline, which is separate from what we're dealing with, but I'll give you an example. Mistakes have been made by code enforcement officers from years gone by, and now the states get involved. So even though we kind of accept it, like, for example, that other residents on your property, it is what it is, it's done and over with. But if the state got involved, they can start asking questions like, why are you not abiding by your zone? Now, the only way they would get involved is if somebody complained or something happened, or Phil was enriching uranium in his cabin up back, and and drew attention to himself. So, like he said, it's kind of, this is our way of cleaning it up and making it more comprehensive and less ambiguous and clear cut and dry.
Can I address the marijuana thing real quick too? That's a selectman. There was a cap originally, and when we voted for it, I was there, we voted for a cap.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, through this process, it was voted that we wouldn't limit them at a town meeting. We've reached out to our town lawyer, and the concern now is, because we've got a few years into marijuana and grow facilities and whatnot, is we could be open for a lawsuit. So meaning if we restrict it, but there's some ways, and it certainly is a concern of the town that I feel like the board feels like the town would now like a limit or a cap on it. So we are addressing that. Jess and I have no desire to do anything with our property. In fact, that's why we bought across the street. We thought for sure there would be a grow facility there if we didn't. So yeah, that's something that we're working on, but it's unfortunately legally, what we're hearing is becoming harder and harder to limit that, as they have more cases tried. Different towns do that, and they've had cases tried against them, and it's kind of like 50-50 right now as to whether we can cap it.
You're right next to the railroad tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought at one time that gas that's there, that LP gas, I thought they were gonna build something there. That was the whole reason they changed that years ago. And then they would change it, but then you couldn't collect tax on it for some reason, because they're Lewiston, Auburn or something like that. think, if I remember correctly, that's how the whole thing started with being switched over to industrial. That's probably, and then it never got built. So I'm wondering if that's.
On the AmeriGas side of the
Yeah,
road?
AmeriGas, yeah.
That I don't know.
That's what that's what I remember, kind of recollection of that. But that's probably.
I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why it never got built, though, is they never followed through on it, and it stayed like that. So.
But as far as the New England Public Warehouse, Jessica here, she had a whole file on it, which was extremely helpful in determining when this fiasco all started.
Yeah.
So. Any more questions?
I don't understand a lot of this stuff, I'll admit that. I live up on Whittemore Road.
Mhm.
Now, going up the beginning part of that, is that a rural or is that industrial? Because I got
So,
a certified letter,
Which letter did you get, ma'am?
I got a certified letter saying that about the zoning being changed.
Were you in a butter or?
I don't know if it's because the backside of my land might be closer to that, if that's why I got it, or,
So I sent out 73 letters, 20 of which went to all properties directly affected by the current zoning. And then the other 53 were the abutters of all those properties. So I'm not exactly sure if Whittemore Road was included. There was
right.
a few residents.
But I'm just wondering, if because I know it when I bought the land, I guess Everett bought behind me. So is that the reason why? I guess I'm not understanding this. Why, is that considered industrial or is that rural?
What's that? The quarry?
It's behind me, behind my land, but I don't know if it's,
Are you on the left side of Whittemore Road,
Yes.
heading towards East Oxford?
Yeah.
So you're talking about Dave Everett's quarry, the land that he bought?
yes,
Yes. So that's not industrial. It doesn't have to
That's
be
not.
industrial.
okay.
No.
So this
Well-
may not pertain to me per se.
No, it sounds like you're more than likely in a butter based on in your letter would have indicated that.
That's what
So, yeah, it doesn't, it affects you indirectly as opposed to the folks that are directly inside
Okay,
the currently zoned, industrial.
okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
No.
Okay, everybody good? So I guess we've already been through the reviewing of it, so.
Next thing, up to make a vote. I guess I'll make a motion that, we change the zoning to the proposed plan that we have. So, that's in front of us for now.
All those in favor? Or, sorry, second? All those in favor? Okay, next is the review of the proposed solar ordinance and incorporating into the zoning ordinance.
Everyone down there?
If you would please, because I don't have any of that stuff in front of me. I try to go off memory, we're in trouble.
All right, so the other zoning issue involving the code enforcement office was a solar energy ordinance, which we currently do not have. There was a moratorium on solar fields, commercial size arrays. That moratorium has since expired. So to get in compliance with I don't think it's necessarily compliance, but to establish an ordinance, we opted to go the route of basically adding, instead of creating a standalone solar array ordinance, we just added it to our current zoning ordinance. If that makes any sense. So our current zoning ordinance regulates land use in different zones whether it's village, residential, rural, mixed use, industrial, okay? So, I didn't have enough to print for everybody. So what I'll do is I'm gonna run down, the highlights that will be inside the, zoning ordinance. And I have one copy of the 70-page zoning ordinance that has all the tracked changes, how all the information I'm about to give you is what it would look like in the zoning ordinance. If anybody wants to review it, I have one copy here, and that's to see how. So in section 14, table of land uses, what I'm about to read is what we're gonna add. So we broke it down to cover every possible scenario with respect to solar energy systems. So the first one is residential scale roof mounted solar energy systems. This would be permitted with review by the CEO in all applicable zones. We have residential scale ground mounted solar energy systems permitted with review by CEO in all applicable zones. Then we have commercial proprietary roof mounted solar systems permitted with review by CEO in all applicable zones. Then there is industrial proprietary roof mounted solar energy systems permitted with review by CEO in all industrial zones. Industrial proprietary ground mounted solar energy systems permitted with review by CEO in all industrial zones. And the last one is commercial scale ground mounted solar energy systems. This would be allowed with planning board site review in industrial zones only and limited to 4 acres. So then for each of those, there is a list of standards that would have to be abided by. There's definitions that would be reflected also in the definitions table of the zoning ordinance. So what I'll do, I won't read and bore everybody with the entire thing. I'll try to summarize it the best I can, because it's probably close to 20 pages. Unless you want me to read it. So, residential scale roof mounted solar energy system. And I'll go over the roof mounted and I'll go over the ground mounted, and they apply to the proprietary for industrial and commercial as well. But we have to have all the language in here, for legal purposes. So a residential scale roof mounted solar energy system may be approved by the code enforcement officer in accordance with section 14, table of land use of this ordinance. Submission requirements: a permit application meeting the criteria of section 18B of this ordinance, a structural report from a qualified professional demonstrating that the applicant's roof is structurally capable of supporting the collateral load of the roof mounted solar energy system. Performance standards include limiting glare from these systems. Safety, roof mounted solar energy systems shall be present and shall not present any unreasonable safety risk as outlined in IRC, which is the International Residential Building Code, but not limited to weight load, wind resistance, and ingress or egress in the event of a fire or other emergency. And of course, there's a height requirement, which is in section 15B of the ordinance. And then it goes on to residential scale grounded, residential scale ground mounted solar energy systems. So these, again, approved by the code enforcement officer in accordance with table 14. Dimensional standards, residential scale ground mounted solar energy systems, that's a tongue twister, may not exceed 25 feet in height and orientated to maximum tilt. Residential scale ground mounted solar energy systems shall adhere to the setback and lot coverages standards contained in section 15 of this ordinance. That's the same with anything on your property, whether it be a shed, above ground pool, in-ground pool, an ADU, a garage. Submission requirements, A permit application meeting the criteria of 18B of this ordinance, and the code enforcement officer may require the applicant to provide additional information included but not limited to manufacturer specs, site plans, and other supporting documentation to ensure the proposed system is accessory to the principal residential use and not commercial in nature. What that basically means is if I live in a 1,200 square foot ranch and I want 3.5 acres of panels, that's gonna raise some red flags. Could we agree?
Right.
Yeah. I think the national average or the state average for energy consumption, I think in Maine, 50 square feet is more than 150 square feet is plenty to support a single family residence. Performance standards, all residential scale ground mounted solar energy system installations must be installed in compliance with the photovoltaic system standards of the latest edition of the National Fire Protection Association. All wiring must be installed in compliance with the photovoltaic system standards of the latest edition of the National Electrical Code. Regarding glare, residential scale ground mounted solar energy systems must be situated to minimize glare onto nearby structures and roadways. Prohibited locations, components of a residential scale ground mounted solar energy system shall not be placed within any legal easement or right-of-way location, or be placed within any stormwater conveyance system, or in any other manner that would alter or impede stormwater runoff from collecting in a constructed stormwater conveyance system. So that's basically residential in a nutshell. And then it goes on to talk about commercial proprietary and industrial proprietary, which is essentially the same standards, only is applying to commercial and industrial proprietary, meaning for their own use only, not to send it out and sell it to the grid.
How is, just a question, how is that like calculated? Like who states how that's calculated, like how much they need? Is that something that's done by whoever's installing the panels, they have everything put together and they bring it to you? Just curious.
I think, so what I would do is look at it at a case-by-case basis. If you're talking a couple hundred square feet of solar panels, whether they're ground mounted or roof, I wouldn't have an issue with that, so long as all the setbacks are met. It'd be no different than if you were, excuse me,
Building a garage.
building a garage or another structure on your property. It's treated as a structure. Yeah.
Shane, like, over at Mainly Action, he has 3 trackers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. He has
Yep.
3 of those solar trackers there. And a little different case because that's commercial, but give us a reference, like as a residential setting, would that be permissible to have 3 of them, by square footage, your best guesstimate?
I would say yes.
Yep.
He has what, 3
trackers, yeah.
trackers,
Yeah.
so I would, yeah, I mean, it depends on, every household is different as far as their energy consumption. Now if he filled it, if that was a private residence or even, well, say you wanted to put 20 more of those out there, I guess that would trigger some, some questions like, why do you need that many? But then again, it's under 4 acres, so that's actually a good question. I probably should look into that.
I did ask him one time, and I think those 3 suffice that business.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, but yeah, I was just curious. The other thing I guess I'll just mention real quick is, I think one of the concerns for a lot of residents is why this got brought up was, we're seeing a lot of these, I guess I would call it a solar farm or an array, showing up in a residential neighborhood on a hillside, and a lot of people just honestly don't want that. They don't want that in their neighborhood, and obviously it could affect property values. Certainly, we're all in the same neighborhood here. If we did it and it was back in the back 40, it's still kind of lack of a better word, an eyesore. If somebody did it up on Whittemore on the side of the hill, you're gonna see that from down on 26. So I think some of it, and again, it was concerns of multiple residents emailing the town manager and the board, concerned about that. Am I right in assuming that's what we're trying to do, is reduce these
Yes.
large arrays from popping up in a residential or rural setting?
And I think the other concern then too is the environmental impact that they have, especially when they're, in the event they were to become abandoned.
And do we have a contingency for that?
Yes, we do. It's built right now. I was gonna get to that next.
Okay.
So for these large arrays, they
Real
could be,
quick, I just have a question. For the ones that are already here, all these big solar farms we already have, I understand they're gonna be kind of grandfathered to a point, correct?
yes.
Now, when it comes, well, I guess you probably might get to it, but when it comes to like this problem, like if they get abandoned, who's gonna pay to have those taken down? Where you're kind of coming in after the fact, I guess I'm just kind of
That,
asking the question.
so, that is a good question, because the rest of this ordinance actually addresses that,
Right.
the commercial scale ground mounted systems. That's a good question.
Which, if I read this correctly, there'll be no more big ones going in anyway, because they can only be put in the industrial.
In the industrial zones,
So
yes.
theoretically shouldn't have to worry about it. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
So the last part to this is the commercial scale ground mounted energy solar. So commercial scale ground mounted solar systems may be approved by the planning board through the site plan review in accordance with section 14 of the land use table. Dimensional standards. Commercial scale ground mounted solar energy systems may not exceed 25 feet in height when orientated at maximum tilt. Commercial scale ground mounted solar energy systems may not exceed 4 acres in size. Commercial scale ground mounted solar energy systems shall adhere to the setback and lot coverage standards combined in section 15 of this ordinance. Lot coverage shall be calculated based on the total airspace projected over the ground. Anybody have any questions on what that is? I can explain it. The lot density coverage. So then we get into the submission requirements, which is basically the plans, a description of the owner of the solar system, the operator, a copy of the agreement and schematic details of the interconnection arrangement. In other words, how it connects to the grid. They would be required to have a Knox box from the fire department. A lot of boilerplate stuff that we require, like you would for any other commercial project. And the key thing here, which is what you were touching on, is a decommissioning plan. And I feel this is important and definitely something we should address at a later time with respect to the current arrays we have. So a decommissioning plan must include a description of the work required to physically remove all components of the solar energy system, including associated foundations, buildings, cabling, electrical components, and any other associated facilities, to the extent that they are not otherwise in or proposed to be placed into productive use. And all land disturbed during decommission must be revegetated. They must provide an estimate of the total cost of decommissioning, including an itemization of estimated major expenses and a projected cost of measures taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects on the environment during the implementation of the decommissioning plan. The itemization of major costs may include, but not limited to, the cost of the following activities: panel removal, foundation and building removal, stabilization of soil, transmission cord removal, and road infrastructure removal. Demonstration in the form of a performance bond, surety bond, letter of credit, or other form of financial assurance as may be accepted to the town, that upon the end of the useful life of the solar energy system, the applicant will have the necessary financial assurance in place for 125% of the estimated cost of decommissioning, subject to review of such costs by the code enforcement officer. The financial assurance shall include a provision granting the town the ability to access the funds and property and perform the decommissioning if the facility is abandoned or the applicant or subsequent responsible party fails to meet their obligation after reasonable notice to be defined in agreement and approved by the planning board. And then it goes on to performance standards. All wire must be installed in compliance with the system standards and based on the latest national electrical code. Buffers, commercial scale ground mounted solar systems shall be buffered from roads and residences by planting, berms, and natural topographical features to the satisfaction of the Oxford Planning Board. Fencing, all commercial scale ground mounted solar energy systems will be wholly protected by a perimeter fence designed to allow for passage of wildlife to the satisfaction of the planning board. Signage, a sign identifying the owner of the property. The commercial scale ground mounted solar energy system shall be installed at each point of ingress and egress and shall provide a 24-hour emergency contact number. Signs may not be used for advertising purposes. Emergency access through a Knox box. They have to provide an interconnection agreement. The applicant shall demonstrate that it has a legally enforceable interconnection agreement with a transmission and distribution utility. In other words, we don't want to see, a 4-acre field go in, and they haven't even talked to CMP if CMP is going to let them join the grid. They have to prove that before it's even constructed. And it goes on to more stuff about glare, more language about glare. Then it goes into more on the decommissioning process, timeframes. If you like, I can keep reading if you folks like. I could talk to Kathleen about posting a copy of this on the town's website if you folks want to print it off and read it yourself and go over it. I guess you probably would have done that prior to tonight.
As we said, we're not approving this tonight, right? This is just a review.
No, this is the proposal.
Does it have to be 4 acres?
What's that?
Does it have to be 4 acres? Can we turn it into like 1, so?
Well, I'm just thinking, I see your point, but it's kind of, it's kind of moot with, there's no industrial zone in the town other than the airport and Record.
Yes.
Unless Records decides he wanted to do it, he's literally the only one that could do it. In the industrial zone, they would be able to
Up
possibly.
to 4 acres, but other people are still not along the route.
But do you see what I'm saying?
I do. As far as the existing arrays, they would be grandfathered.
Right, I understand that.
So at some point, they would be expected to adhere to this, either through change of ownership or if they completely upgraded the entire array, then they would have to be current standards.
Which they can't.
It would be,
because they're not gonna use
it'd be similar to, I'm basing this on my conversations with Erica. It'd be similar to if you owned an old farmhouse and you gutted it completely.
Yeah.
Or even if you just tore it right down to the ground. If you're gonna rebuild it, then you have to build it to current code and ordinances standards. And it would be the same way with the existing arrays that are out there.
So theoretically, all the existing arrays are in mixed use. So if they ever wanted to upgrade or change owner or whatever, some big change, they couldn't anyway. Couldn't they? Because they're technically in the industrial zone or
They
not.
could keep operating indefinitely.
Right,
Um,
but they can't like add whole nother field and a whole bunch of arrays.
no, I think if they're already exceeding, no, so they're grandfathered.
Right.
As they are currently right now. So if they were to change the size of the footprint, then yes, that would trigger a review, okay, how are we gonna approach this? I think the idea behind, it's not addressed in here because the idea is it's already there, so the grandfather. Now, if it was decommissioned and it was taken away, it can never go back.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of my thought, like, they can't increase the size of it. They can keep what they have, but they can't add more.
Yes. And
Maybe along the same line here, is the maps we have provided are just the areas going back to previous zoning,
Yes.
previous subject, the zoning we're talking about, but is there any other area in the town of Oxford that is zoned industrial? Is the solar array, is it industrial down off of 4th Street where they put that array in? Is anyways along 26 industrial, is the only industrial, is that correct? The
Yes.
only industrial area is?
It's the airport and record
okay.
lumber, the two lots, yeah.
from looking at this map, I think it's not just the airport, it also includes, the other businesses that are down there.
They're warehousing out behind New Balance, I believe.
Yeah, I think,
It's
Used to be-
Grover,
used to be-
Grover's down there.
Schiavi.
Schiavi's down there. So that whole area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, like you, but that small, 4 acres.
Yeah,
4 acres is
but how that all reads, that's a lot of money and work. So who's gonna do it? If they're gonna come and say, I'm putting 4 acres of solar panels for mobile home. We have the right to question that and maybe not propose it.
I haven't had a real in-depth conversation with anybody, for that matter, as far as the current arrays that are, the commercial scale that currently exists. Eric and I did talk about it briefly, but my takeaway was it would be treated like any other thing that was grandfathered. If it goes away, the grandfathering clause goes away. And then if you wanted to bring it back, then you have to, go basically buy the new ordinance.
Can you as a board tonight reduce, I think I agree with you guys, as far as, right now, residential or mixed-use property, you can still put 4 acres worth of solar in.
That's good size.
That's real good size, yeah, is that what you, I feel like maybe I'm on the same
No,
page.
you're
right.
Yeah,
thinking
That's
exactly.
where I'm at.
So could they make a motion tonight to reduce that to 2 acres or 1 acre? And I know some of the verbiage also covers the need, if it's going back onto the grid, you guys will have some say, but if you just reduce that down to 1 acre or 2 I would be okay with that.
So my understanding, the 4 acres was basically the average size. It was a number that was generated based on the average size of the commercial scale.
Right, well, we don't want any commercial.
No, I understand.
That's why we had the moratorium.
Yeah.
3 trackers is enough for James down at Mainly Action.
Yeah,
Three trackers would be pretty good for any residential usage.
I mean, even like a lot of these grows that we see everywhere, if they wanted to put solar up, I just think I'm with you, I think 4 acres.
yeah, I don't
is
agree
too
with
much.
4 acres. I'd like to see it drop down to 2 worst case.
I think you can make a motion and just.
Well,
This has got to go to town meeting, right? This is all to
Yes.
get.
Well, that's, we
Yeah.
kind of do, this is like, we're like the preliminary,
Gotcha.
so. I'm like you,
Yeah, 4 acres is leaving that a little too wide open.
Smoke coming out your ears, Shane.
No, I'm looking to see if,
I don't remember reading anything in there specifically about that.
Yeah, where
I
did-
mean,
Where did 4 acres come from?
I can't tell you as a planning board, what direction to go. I guess my first question is, 4 acres, is it too much for residential or any sort of proprietary? Or do you think it's too much for commercial scale?
I can't think of anybody in this town that would need 4 acres worth of.
No.
Okay, so
What
one
this gentleman
approach
said,
would be,
Mainly's only got those and he's running a garage and a whole warehouse.
one approach would be, we could add a limit to residential scale ground mounted, in commercial scale ground mounted proprietary, and industrial proprietary ground mounted. We could if you're, I'm just throwing out ideas, if you're concerned about someone throwing up 3.5 acres in their backyard, I think that's too much.
Which I understand, I don't know, I'm with him, I would rather see more like 2 acres max. Than 4. I think 4 is way too much.
Across the board, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine any residential needing more than like 1.5 of like what mainly action has. I mean, honestly, even 2 max. I do electrical stuff all the time, it's just, that's a lot of power.
So if we propose it tonight, and it goes before the select board?
So the select board's it's already gone before the select board. This would be the last stop before town meeting.
So if we were to say, like, make a motion that we wanted to reduce the ground-mounted residential, commercial, and industrial to 2 acres max of the ground mount. Now, if they're on the roof of their buildings, I've got no problem with that because you're not spreading out anymore. That's kind of my thought.
I agree.
But now in the ordinance, without me going back through it, there's nothing written in there that states like how much a residential can do, is there?
That's what I was
It's
just looking
well, and
at.
that kind of goes back to the question I asked you, like, who's to say how much power they're using and how many they should have? I guess it's, like, is that something they're gonna have your power usage is this, and the solar company says you're gonna need this to offset it? I kind of think that should be kind of tied together. If the solar company's coming in and said, yeah, you need 10,000 watts worth of solar panels, okay, that's what you need.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, it doesn't, I'm looking under residential scale ground mounted, there is no size limitation. The only specific size limitation is in the commercial.
Commercial and industrial, right? Commercial. No, just the commercial, I believe.
Wouldn't each zoning area's impervious surface cover that?
I was just gonna say that, so there are other things built into the zoning ordinance that would
For the area.
impose a limitation. What he said, lot density.
Yep.
Is one, and depending on what zone you live in residentially or even commercial, industrial, how much, you can't cover, if your entire lot is 4 acres, you can't put 3.5 acres worth of, or 3 acres worth of solar panels without DEP approval. And I don't even believe they would even approve it.
I mean, I'm not so much worried about the residential, I'm more worried about the commercial, the bigger stuff. I'd still like to reduce it to like 2 acres max. That's my thought. I mean. But, and that's why I was saying, is this like the final, because if we do a motion to say we wanna limit the commercial to 2 acres, obviously that's, who's gonna change it, and then it's gonna have to go to the town for the town meeting to be approved anyway, but if we make a motion, does that mean it changes it, or that's just what we want to change?
Does it just bring it up at the town meeting?
I guess those are kind of my.
That's a good question.
I think you're right, yeah, I think maybe it would go, the planning board recommends, the select board approved this, the planning board recommends this, and I think
Go
that,
back to you guys, you think?
no, I think at the town meeting, you get to vote either way, you go, all those in
Kind of like
favor.
the budget.
Just like the
I
budget.
think so,
Okay.
yeah,
That
I think
makes
so.
sense.
They
That
have
makes
the
sense.
budget committee recommendation, they have the select board recommendation.
I think that what we brought up about the permeability is a good point. The concern I have with that is, I was here when we were forced to pass the solar array by the public safety building. And with the catch-22 on that is the angle.
Yeah.
So they were able to put quite a few more in than I even thought they'd be able to put in, because a certain angle, there's a calculation for all that. So I like the lot size limit personally. I'd be a fan of that.
Aside from the lot density, you still have to maintain all the setbacks.
Right.
Yeah.
So unless you own
20 acres of land.
20 acres of land, it's not gonna be an issue.
Which currently, right up behind Record Building Supply, that there's a small little hill up in there, which is, may or may not be coming for sale, and that's a prime example. I think there's 40 acres up behind that church, behind, Record Building Supply up in there. That'd be a prime example, so they could technically put panels on 4 acres of that. Because if it's 30 acres, 4 acres
Well,
would meet that coverage, most likely, I'm assuming a little bit here, but,
Yeah, most places is 50%.
and I think that's what we're trying to prevent,
Mhm.
is my
exactly,
point.
yes, exactly. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I don't like seeing solar panels. So,
I can tell you, you're not alone, because I've got quite a few emails and so has the town manager, so.
That's- We wanna do what's best for the town, we're all town auction people. So,
you would have to make the motion.
yeah, I'm gonna make a motion that we drop that down to the ground mounted to 2 acres.
Yeah, second that.
All those in favor?
Just to clarify, the ground mounted commercial scale or ground mounted across the board?
Across the board.
Sorry if that made it more difficult, but
No.
I feel like that's a good move.
One question. You're right around town, not just here, it's all over the state, but you see the homegrown solar panels, where they've gone into home, have a freight and bought, 2 or 3 100-watt panels to put them up. Those require permit, what's the breaking point? Or does it have to be commercially
I mean,
installed?
if it's like, if you buy like a small system for like your RV or your camp that's portable, no, there's no permit required.
I see them going up and they'll have, 2 panels, next thing you know, there's 5 panels, next thing you know, there's 10 panels. They just keep, putting more plywood up and adding more panels.
Yeah.
Because I know there's some businesses going around to people's homes and they're putting solar panel, they do an energy thing for their house and they're putting solar panels on their roof and all
Yeah.
that. They're kind of leasing the panels to help offset their.
Yeah, right now, without ordinance, we do require a building permit for ground mounted or if you mount them to your roof. And the reason for that is to track, to make sure nobody's violating, lot density requirements, setback requirements. And for roof mounted, it's to make sure that it's not going into a place that's not safe. Now, that's what triggers code enforcement's inspection process, to make sure that everything is safe and is done based on manufacturer specs. Because nobody wants to have a system on the roof that's too heavy, in the first big snowstorm you wake up wearing your solar panels. Or God forbid someone's house burns down because it wasn't wired correctly. But portable systems, yeah, I wouldn't look at that.
Put them on a trailer.
Well,
That's pretty much it, Phil.
Anything, any more comments? Or-
I know I read fast and double my words together, so
You do a good job.
anybody has any other questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
How you enjoying your new job?
I enjoy it, it's a challenge.
What it's supposed to be.
He's doing a good job.
Yeah, he is.
Not bad after 18 years in prison. I worked there, I wasn't doing I was doing life on installment plan.
So we need a motion for that. So we need a motion to make the amendment, or we need to make a motion to accept the,
Do we
or was
need a
that
motion
considered
to-
our acceptance of it, or just changing it?
You made the motion to change it, I took notes, I will submit that to Erica,
Presented to the selectmen and town meeting.
and then we'll have two versions, either electronically available or like a bullet point version like this. I think I'll talk to the town clerk about putting two versions electronically on the website so people can review it. So they don't have to listen to me ramble 20 minutes again.
Yeah, if you don't mind looking up that question I asked you, like how they're gonna depict how many solar panels and all that. Is there something that you guys are gonna limit that by their power usage or just? Make sense?
So
Or is that
when-
something you're gonna just kind of go case by case?
So when I originally embarked on this, I did do some research to find out in the state of Maine, in the climate zone that we live in, like what's the average energy consumption for a single family home? And I took that information and I said, okay, based on that, what would I need for solar arrays to accommodate that energy consumption? I believe it was 150 square feet of red panels. In talking with the town manager, he was reluctant on, you know, being too restrictive.
Oh, I totally agree, Yeah.
Restrictive. I tend to, now the more I think about it, talking to everybody, I kind of agree that there has to be some sort of mechanism in place to limit, you know, if you live on a 30-acre farm, do you really need 2 acres or even an acre for that matter? Now, solar panels,
Exactly.
if you just provide it for yourself.
And that's where I think it comes, that's where it's gonna come for a lot more.
Yeah, well, and I don't have the professional expertise to make that determination. I would have to do some research and talk to some people and, but I think this is a good start and.
Anything else? I make a motion that we close this evening's meeting.
Are you waiting for me
Do I
again?
get a second? All in favor?
Conversation.
No. You have to do the envelope.